Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I am Trevor. I'm the Communications Manager with the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. Thank you to everyone who is attending today's webinar. If you're new to the webinar series or to CCSN in general, we're an organization working with cancer patients and survivors to learn about the complexity of our health system, connect with others to plan action, and act on those plans to create better outcomes and healthy survivorship. If you want more, please visit our website, survivornet.ca. You'll find plenty of information like news and events and other information to participate in research, and of course, our webinar series. Now, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube, and a link will be provided by the email that you registered with. We will have a quick Q&A session at the end, but if you would like, put your questions in the chat before the end of the presentation. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest, Nigel Rawson. He is a pharmacoepidemiologist and pharmaceutical policy researcher based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He is also a Macdonald-Laurier Institute Senior Fellow, a Fraser Institute Senior Fellow, and a Canadian Health Policy Institute Affiliate Scholar. Dr. Rawson has performed epidemiological studies of prescription drug safety and pharmaceutical policy issues for over 40 years and published more than 140 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters, as well as a monograph on drug study. He was the president of Eastlake Research Group, the mission of which was to create a data-driven response to pharmaceutical policy issues, and he continues his work as an independent researcher. So without further ado, here is Mr. Rawson with what's next for the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board.
Okay, thank you, Trevor, and thank you to CCSN for inviting me to give this presentation. So I was asked, what's next for the Patented Medicines Prices Review Board? Much has been written and discussed about the PMPRB over the past 5 years, probably more than the 30 years before that. And I thought I'd probably begin, although we've seen that, I'm not sure that everybody knows what the PMPRB does. So I thought I'd begin by saying, well, what does the PMPRB actually do? Well, it's the federal government's quasi-judicial agency regulating time-limited drug patents. It's the only federal government tool to regulate prices. It was the only federal tool to regulate prices when it was established in 1987. Remember, in 1987, there was no CADITH. There was no Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance. There was just this to ensure the prices were not being abused. So the drug developer has a fixed period of patent time for a new medicine before anybody else can copy it or produce something similar. So the PMPRB's role is to ensure that the patent period is not abused by the patentee charging an overly high price. Its role begins when a new drug is first sold in Canada. And that's a little unpredictable as to when that occurs, because it can occur fairly soon after a drug's given regulatory approval for marketing, if somebody buys the drug out of their own pocket. Or it can begin when a person obtains a drug with help from government insurance or private insurance. And that will go for government insurance. It clearly is some way down the road from when regulatory approval is first given. It remains the only price tool for the federal government. So how does it do its work? Well, for the past 35 years, it has used an external reference pricing test, and that it looks at the intended list price in Canada that a pharmaceutical manufacturer wants to charge, and compares it with the list prices in France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States. They're often referred to as the PMPRB 7. And so it looks at those and uses an advisory panel who provides scientific advice on the improvement that the drug provides. This advisory panel categorizes medicines as breakthrough, substantial improvement, moderate improvement, or slight no improvement. So 4 categories. A breakthrough drug is usually a drug for which there's no medicine available currently and which the disease is substantial. In any given year, relatively few drugs receive a breakthrough categorization, 2, 3, usually less than 5. A larger, but still not a particularly large number receive a substantial improvement. And in fact, most drugs are regarded and categorized as moderate improvement or slight or no improvement. The category is important because it sets the maximum price level that a company can charge. So for a breakthrough, it's the median of those 7 comparative countries. Clearly, not all prices for all those countries are available at the time that the PMPRB does its work. So it's the median of whatever's available. If it's regarded as a substantial improvement, then it's the higher of the median and the top price for drugs in its class. So one assumes that there are some other drugs in that class. So it's the higher of whatever the median is and the top price. If it's a moderate improvement, it's the midpoint of the median and the top price for drugs in the class. And if it's slight, no improvement, it's just the top price of drugs in the class. So you can see that the price gradually moves down as the level of improvement or innovation, if you like, decreases. So bear that in mind as we move through these slides. The other point is that the maximum price remains the same throughout the patent. So once it's set, it's set. In 2017, having signalled a couple of years earlier that the Liberals wanted to move drug prices and reduce drug prices substantially, the PMPRB put forward proposed changes in 2017. The first one was that it was going to replace the higher drug price countries in its price test with some lower price countries. So it would replace the United States and Switzerland, those are higher drug price countries, with Australia, Belgium, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, and Spain. And originally it planned also to include South Korea, but that was dropped. That country was dropped along the way. So it's going to replace 2 countries with 6, and so we would have 11 countries in the price test, sometimes called PMPRB 11, and I will do that in a few minutes. I was also going to use pharmacoeconomic evaluations from health technology assessments, like those done by Cadith. And those are really designed to assess the value of a product. They look at the value for a cost effectiveness threshold. They're not designed to set prices, but they wanted to reduce the price to achieve a low cost effectiveness threshold. So they'd say, you must reduce the price to this value to achieve this certain cost effectiveness threshold. I put here fairly low because the value would in fact be fairly low, especially for many of the new drugs coming up, particularly those in oncology, rare diseases, and some of the other high technology products that are starting to appear. Manufacturers would also have to reduce prices based on Canada's per capita gross domestic product. So there was a test there that said if the price was exceeding a certain value, then they would have to reduce it further. And also the prices would be reduced based on the size of the drug sales in Canada. So as the company sold more and more drugs, then they would be forced to reduce the price. In addition, manufacturers would have to provide confidential information about rebates negotiated with insurers, with the PMPRB. The manufacturers negotiate rebates, discounts with private and government insurers because they're large purchasers. And so when the PMPRB does its work, it's losing list prices, which really don't represent what actually happens in many cases, because probably the majority of Canadians obtain their drugs through some kind of insurance. That's confidential business information, and so that could cause quite a bit of concern. What's the federal government saying? Well, forcibly reduce patent medicine prices. That's clearly been on the government's agenda for quite some time. It's on the Liberals' agendas, but it's consistent with Ottawa's antagonistic approach to the pharmaceutical industry, which has been going on for several decades. So, whatever stripe is the federal government is, it's been consistent, whether it's been Conservatives or Liberals. In my opinion, it's also consistent with moving from clinical evidence to cost containment. So rather than focusing on, is it an important drug, then the focus is what's the cost. And I recognize that governments and private insurers are concerned about costs getting out of hand, but it's necessary to balance the two. I don't believe I'm alone in this view, because I noticed in the Globe and Mail a couple of weeks ago, a former British Columbia cancer president was quoted as saying that the whole emphasis shifted away from medicine and science, leading into the future to budget management. So the point is to make the medicine fit with the budget rather than the other way around. So the proposed PMPRB changes, not surprisingly, caused great opposition from drug developers. They didn't want their business confidential information released, and the driving down of prices was not something they wanted to see. It also caused concern among patients, not surprisingly. Because I noted that almost all the briefs submitted by patients to the Standing Committee on Health of Parliament were against or concerned about the proposed changes, because they were concerned that the changes would limit access to medicines. Legal challenges by drug developers led to court rulings that struck down the use of health technology assessments and other economic tests to set prices. Also struck down the requirement to divulge confidential information about rebates negotiated with insurers. So the result really is, what ended up was really, there's a whole lot of uncertainty going on. And amongst drug developers, they really do not like uncertainty. They like to know, like to be able to predict what they can do with the medicines going forward. So what was the impact on us of uncertainty on drug submissions? Well, a number of people have said that, well, it's reduced drug submissions, but often that was anecdotal information. So I looked at new therapeutic medicines, that is, medicines that benefit, that relieve disease or alleviate disease, not those that are used for diagnoses, submitted to the US FDA or the European Medicines Agency between 2011 and 2020. I took the first submission to either the FDA or the EMA as a baseline, so that's when I took up the first submission. And I do that because companies predominantly go to submit to either the FDA or the EMA, predominantly again the FDA, excuse me, before they submit to countries like Canada, Australia, or similar countries. And I wanted to look at, what I looked at was the percentage of drugs submitted to FDA and or EMA that were submitted to Health Canada between 2011 and the midpoint of 2022. It took a longer period for Health Canada because, as I said, submissions are made later to this country than the FDA or the EMA, and it was appropriate to look and allow for a longer period of time for submissions in this country. So has there been a change? Well, excuse me, As I said, I took the year of submission to the first agency, whether it was the FDA or the EMA, and as I said, predominantly it was the FDA. So these are the years for that first submission. And I said, well, what percentage was submitted in Canada? And as you can see, between 2011 and 2014, fairly level, around 80–85%, as you can see here. And then following following that, so there's a fairly steep decline. So you can see that the decline then is that of drugs submitted to the first agency in 2020, only a little over 40% have actually come and been submitted to Health Canada. And I want to emphasize this point that if you fit a line to these, you can see this, it's a fairly flat line, so fairly even. And then you can see this quite sharp, I would say fairly sharp decline in subsequent years. That's for all medicines. So this presentation is to the CCSN. So I thought that there would be an interest in oncology drugs. So I looked at oncology drugs and compared them with all medicines, and obviously oncology is grouped in this all medicines category. Oncology drugs form a fairly large proportion of the medicines submitted, but because they're somewhat smaller, then there's some variation. But you can see there's a similar sort of kind of pattern here. And in fact, more oncology drugs submitted, the higher proportion of oncology drugs submitted to Canada than many other medicines. But you can see a kind of the same kind of pattern, at least that there's a decline, although it still remains above all medicines. So I don't show them here, but if you look at the other medicines, you can see that clearly they're somewhat down here. You can look at it another way. You can say between 2011 and 2015, for those drugs submitted to the first agency, what proportion came to Canada? Of all medicines, it was 82%. In the subsequent period, it fell to 58%. So a drop of over 20 percentage points. For oncology, a higher percentage submitted in Canada, as I said, over this period, 92%, and that fell to 71% over this period. So again, a 20 percentage point drop. So the decline in submissions is real. Also looked at a case study to try to see what the impact of these changes, predominantly the proposed changes that were put forward, what the impact would be on rare disease drugs. So I looked list prices for a rare, severely debilitating genetic disorder drug approved in Canada within the last 5 years, a real drug. But for reasons of business concern, we'll make it anonymous. So we'll call it Intercell. And it's the first line of first line lifelong therapy for a disorder with no effective alternative treatment. So it's classified as a breakthrough. And again, to maintain the anonymity, the list price is adjusted by a consistent small percentage and rounded. We looked at the perspective of a global pharma executive sitting in an office in the United States or in a European country, thinking, well, what should I do over the next 12 to 18 months? Got this new rare disease drug. What should I do? Should I launch it in Canada? Should I submit it in Canada? What should I do? And so the maximum list price allowed for a breakthrough drug is the median of the list prices in the reference countries, as I said before. So for the the 7 countries that they've used for the majority of the time, the PMPRB 7, the list prices are shown here, not available for Sweden. At the time of the launch in Canada, there was only 3 country prices available. One of them is the United States. And you can see that the United States price is much, much higher. The United Kingdom is pretty high, and the other countries are somewhat lower, particularly these. So at the time of the launch, the median value was 25,527. and the median of the 6 countries that are now available, in fact, is somewhat lower. What about the new PMPRB 11? Well, these are the prices here, and you can see that the median of those 11 countries is considerably lower again, 22,191. Predominantly because the US has been removed, and of course Switzerland. So would the list price be PMPRB compliant? Well, the list price when first sold was $25,016. It remains so. The list price was below the median of the list prices in the median of the three PMPRB 7 countries that were available at the time of the first sale in Canada. So is PMPRB compliant. The median of the prices in the 11 countries is 22,191, as I said. So the current list price is not PMPRB 11 compliant by at least 12.8%. So for the pharma executive, they'll be thinking, well, that's is that worth me launching here? Well, 12.8% might not seem large, but it could be sufficient to deter a company from launching a new medicine in Canada. The extent to which a developer's target price is below the PMPRB 711, but above the median of the 11 countries, will make the difference between deciding whether to launch in Canada or not. And given the state of flux in the situation with regard to the PMPRB 11, I would say that the likely decision is to wait and see. In April, we heard that the only change in comparator countries, only the change in comparator countries will be implemented as of July the 1st, and as a status quo situation. On October 6, new draft guidelines were put forward for consultation. They're available at this website. Anybody reading these guidelines will see that they are vague, in my opinion, deliberately. Others would say they're ambiguous. So the PMPRB will identify the therapeutic benefit, the class comparators, the dose regimens, and reference strength, and its scientific advisors will only be consulted on an ad hoc basis. So the scientific advisors, as I said, really only categorize a small number as breakthrough, and another small number as a substantial improvement. But it's going to be brought, majority of it's going to be brought into the PMPRB's house, and the staff will decide on that. So, in my opinion, therapeutic innovation is not going to be recognized, or rarely recognized. So that's one concern. The focus is also going to be, appears to be threatening an investigation if a manufacturer's list price is not considered to be low enough. But what is going to be low enough is not terribly clear. An investigation is going to be started if a medicine's list price exceeds the median international price. Well, that's fair enough. That's what we've done in the past. If it's between the median and the lowest international price, but exceeds the top of the domestic therapeutic comparator prices, bit of a mouthful there, but basically whatever the PMPRB chooses as comparators, if it exceeds the top of that, then, but is still between the median and the lowest international price, then an investigation may be started. It may also be started if the medicine's proposed list price exceeds the midpoint between the top of the domestic therapeutic comparator prices and the lowest international price, and the top of the DTCC is more than 50% lower than the lowest international price. So you can see the complexity here, I said vagueness, but maybe it's the ambiguity. It's going to be difficult for manufacturers to decide, will my price instigate an investigation? Will it be considered low enough? And so I would suggest that that's going to be difficult for them. Prices are also going to be subject to an uncertain or floating maximum list price. So as I said, in addition, regular reassessments could be imposed with each new indication for a medicine. So as a price would be put forward at the ceiling for the first indication, a new indication for that medicine comes up, and the reassessment could be imposing a lower price. It could also be for new sales of medicines in other countries. And behind this, of course, is the fluctuation in currency exchange rates. They may not fluctuate that much, but it's something, yet another factor that manufacturers have got to be building into their decisions. In addition, prices will be benchmarked annually, so that's new. Well, as I said before, once prices ceiling is fixed, it's fixed. So developers must consider not only whether a new medicine's price will be compliant at launch, but over its patent life. So that may mean that they either fix a low price at the beginning, or they're going to say, well, as price goes over time, they're going to change that. So you can see that if anybody reading these changes will find them somewhat difficult to follow, in my opinion. And as I said, I think that's probably a deliberate policy. So we've got so these proposed changes raise questions. The first question is, will the PMPRB use its pricing test for new countries in the same way as in the past? And that's clearly no. We're going to change the countries. Well, they've got new countries, but we're going to change the way they use that test. Will the company's target list price be PMP compliant both at launch and over its patent life? Well, I don't know. That's something that they've got to look at, consider either as they move forward in time or at the beginning when they first launch in Canada. Will the changes in Canada impact companies' business in other countries? Well, Canada is used as a reference country in other countries that use these kind of pricing tests. A couple of examples of Brazil and South Africa. Those countries represent much bigger potential markets than Canada. And so if pricing Canada is forced down, and then those countries use the Canadian price, is it going to force down prices in those countries? And if a company is concerned about that, then they probably won't launch in Canada. Or at least they won't launch until they've got through what they regard as higher potential, higher beneficial markets. So it might not just deny Canadians the drug, but it might actually won't just could deny Canadians those drugs, or to just delay them for quite a long period. Will prices of high-cost medicines, oncology medicines, rare disease medicines be especially reined in? Well, it's difficult to say from those new proposed guidelines, but potentially yes, because government insurance plans, the provinces, are particularly focused on the sort of sticker price and then say, can we afford those drugs? So that is a concern. What might the change mean for highly specialized breakthrough medicines? Does it mean that innovation in Canada is not particularly regarded highly? What happens for those medicines? Are we going to say, well, we can't afford those innovative medicines? But those innovative medicines are often the medicines that will supply or provide medicines to patients with unmet needs. And so that's a concern. I can't answer these questions specifically, but these are questions that drug developers who are going to have to answer, and indeed patients are going to be concerned about. So what are the implications for patients? Well, the federal government certainly hasn't relinquished its objective of reducing Canadian drug prices. That's quite clear from these proposed changes. It's also clear from the government's comments and statements. The slowdown in medicines that are submitted in Canada are likely to continue. That's a concern because some of these medicines are highly innovative. They are filling important gaps in healthcare. So, it's unfortunate if we see that slowdown. So patients' access to new innovative medicines, especially those highly specialized breakthrough medicines, may become even more difficult. And the question arises that is Ottawa setting up for a basic universal pharmacare? The Liberals are supported by the NDP, and the NDP has priorities. We know about dental care and some other priorities, but somewhere in there is universal pharmacare. It seems to be moving towards, or at least in the initial stages, to a pharmacare providing essential medicines. What essential medicines are is up in the air a bit, but does it mean sort of antibiotics, antihypertensives, antidepressants, those kind of things? Or does it include something more comprehensive? Because the risk is that if we're introducing a universal pharmacare covering essential medicines and say that later on we'll extend that, is that we never get that extension. So what can we conclude? Well, certainly uncertainty about how prices were regulated at launch and subsequently makes the risk of launching in Canada, I said untenable, but certainly a complex business until we have greater clarity about the new guidelines. Certainly seems highly likely that drug developers' decisions will be wait and see, at least until we see the new guidelines finalized. In my opinion, I think we'll see greater challenge. We'll see legal challenges to the new proposed guidelines. We'll certainly see considerable opposition. We started to see that already, and it is, that sort of again causes uncertainty. As I said, drug developers don't like uncertainty, and so it seems highly likely that pharma executives sitting in the US or in the European Union is going to say, well, I've got this new drug coming up. I think we'll wait and see how to launch it in Canada. We'll move to more, should we say, collaborative countries. And if this decision occurs commonly, then we're going to see launches of new medicines at best delayed and worse not happen. We've seen that occurring. It's got, in my opinion, it will continue to occur until we've seen some clear directions. The PMPRB hopes that the consultation period will allow them to put new guidelines into place in the new year. I think they're optimistic on that, but I guess only time will tell. And thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much to you, Dr. Lawson. And I would like to inform everyone also that this is one in a series of our webinar series for information on things like the Patented Medicine Prices Review Board and other things cancer related. If you're not seeing emails in your inbox about this webinar series, we send them out every time that a webinar comes up. Check your spam folder. We do use a third-party email service, and sometimes it goes into the spam folder. Best way is to add us to your contact list. So once again, this webinar and others will be up on our website, survivornet.ca, where you can find the webinar series under our ACT tab, and you can find them all on demand there, as well as access to slides to this and others. So thank you, Nigel, once again for this fantastic presentation. It was extremely interesting, and I hope that everyone here has a fantastic day.